Hello, everyone. This is Rebecca Green for the Palooza podcast, and I am very excited to speak with my wonderful guest today, Dr. Charlynn Ruan. Dr. Charlynn, thank you for being here with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
This is going to be a great conversation. She is a fabulous lady who has so much to talk to us about, but let me tell you a little bit about her first. She is a clinical psychologist, founder and CEO of Thrive Psychology Group, a large group practice specializing in women's mental health. With extensive experience working with female founders and CEOs, she is an expert in trauma recovery, post-traumatic growth, and peak performance. She's certified by EMDRIA in EMDR and attachment-focused EMDR. That was a mouthful. Dr. Ruan provides advanced treatments for PTSD, anxiety, ADHD, insomnia, and more. She is a sought-after speaker and media expert featured in Shape, Reader's Digest, Vogue, and Dame Magazine, offering insights on self-talk, stress management, personal growth, and the unique mental health challenges women face throughout life's transition. I mean, this is such good stuff. I just love all of this. I love what you do for women. I definitely want to dive in and talk about as much as we can in the time allotted. But let's start with, I know you work extensively with female founders and CEOs, and I'm just curious what unique mental health challenges that you're seeing with these high achieving women.
Yeah. And it's interesting how I got into that space. And now I would say probably maybe half to maybe 75% of my clients are female founders or at least like high functioning executives. And partially because there's not a lot of people that can do that or have experience with it. So once you start seeing one, then they refer their other founder friends and
Of
then
course.
become the person. And I actually do see some
Love
male
it.
founders now too, because
Oh,
again, there's so few people seeing founders and they have some
yes.
similarities, but again, there's some specific things for women. And so I would say a couple things that people don't realize. There's a lot of female founders that have an enormous amount of trauma. And so,
Mm,
it's interesting how, like, when you read my bio, you can see it almost seems like these things are at odds, but they're not, where it's like really in depth, really hardcore trauma. And what I call peak performance, because we don't talk about that for women or like thriving. We're always just like be functional, and we don't talk about like, okay, how do I not just be okay? How do I like become my best self? How do I like become my most authentic, most empowered self? All of that. And there's not like a great word for it. And very little out there. If you think about like just in your mind, all of the influencers, all the people talking about biohacking and peak performance, they're all aimed at men. And again, like what women need and most thrive in is a lot different than what a man needs, just downright to our biology.
very
And
true.
nothing out there, which really says something about the expectations we have for women. I mean,
Yep.
we can see it trickle down even to like what insurance covers for like medical stuff, right? Like, there's so little around perimenopause and menopause. And if you go in and say something like, my sex drive is off, they're going to be like, okay, right? If you're a woman, if you're a guy, they're going to be like, here, have some Viagra and we're going to cover it with insurance. And with women, they're like, nah, like nothing, just crickets. And so, but it's such a cool period of time to be living in right now because women are not shutting up the way that they have, partially podcasts, like what you're doing. Like most of my clients get a lot of their information through podcasts, through other women
That's
going through,
awesome.
sharing knowledge, not being silenced, not like giving into the stigma of I can't talk about these things, and really coming together. So it's such a fun time because women are just, we're just embracing our everything in a way that we haven't. Again, unprecedented pressures as always, but at the same time, like where we're speaking out. So the two, that's something that goes together, like with founders. And I would say I think all women want that, right? To be their best and to have their peak performance.
Yes. Yes.
And not to be discounted because of their trauma, right? Post-traumatic growth is a really powerful thing. But a lot of people think if they've been through something traumatic that it counts them out, of being
You
high functioning.
explain to everyone what post-traumatic growth is? Because I guarantee you that people probably don't know.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my clients didn't until I told
Yeah.
them. So it's a whole newer. There's a whole area of research around it. So basically, what psychologists notice, a lot of stuff is like we just kind of stumbled across it and then studied it. But what they noticed was like, okay, a bunch of people go through something really traumatic. How come a percentage of those people have like low functioning, just they're low functioning the rest of their lives? They have like intractable PTSD. They will like never really, like it seems like they just have an injury they'll never recover from. And then a
Hmm.
percentage of those people become wiser, faster, smarter, they go out in the world and do incredible things. And if you just cast upon your mind of like anyone who's done incredible things, like, I don't know, Nelson Mandela, right? Or like even Oprah, right? Of like, and they talk about how their trauma made them partially who they are. And so then psychologists are like, we should study this, right? Maybe we should study
Yes.
what goes right to figure out helping people to figure out what goes right and how to make things go right instead of just
Mm.
how to be a symptom based way of looking at things to just be like, oh, let's just get rid of your PTSD. And what we found was that depending on what you do when the hard thing happens, and if you use it for growth, it actually is a huge catalyst for change. And it's a powerful factor in your life. But everything is about the choice you have in a circumstance where usually you didn't have choice. So that's a big thing, is a mindset shift. And as much as I love people talking about mental health out in the world, there is sometimes still a way of looking at things. Like trauma is, I always say, it's an injury, not an illness. It's healable.
Mm.
You can grow.
Love that.
Yeah. And people will say things like, I have anxiety, like it's a life sentence, right? It's like, there's treatment, like diagnosis is
Yes.
always step one, right? And
Oh.
we're not going to flatten the world around us. We have to like seek the treatment. And same with trauma. Like, and so a lot of the clients I've worked with, it's like, you would never know the amount of trauma they went through, and they're doing incredible things in the world. So, you know, yeah.
I'm always floored when I hear people's stories. We don't know the backstory. We really don't. We see the success, but we don't know what brought them there.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so that's that, for me, the powerful work I love to do is like working with people who have really hard things in their past, but who are really, really committed to like using that for their own good and the good of others. And those are
So
clients that I work with.
I love it. I love what you're doing. I've told you that since I met you. I think what you're doing is amazing work for women and men. It sounds like you're working with men
Yeah.
too now.
Mhm.
But, I want to back up to, someone who is successful, has PTSD, maybe doesn't feel like they're healing. What advice do you have for them to start going on the right path?
Yeah, I mean, I really think yes. It's interesting because when you have PTSD, often you're very high functioning in some areas. And then it's like you'll just be walking along and the floor will drop out and you will feel like, what just happened, right? It's a very feeling of being fractured where you can
Mm.
function. It's not like a lot of different things where it's like, okay, this person's low functioning across the board. They will be super high functioning in certain areas. But then, like, say, for example, they're very professionally successful, but then they get really, really triggered in relationships because maybe their trauma is related to attachment, right?
Yeah.
So, and,
Yeah.
and that's where I see a lot of people, because of Organ Founders, it's like, okay, I'm great in my company, but then we'll find areas where like the things they use to get a certain level of success, because they still operate in a survival mode, they will tear down their own success. They will self-sabotage
Mm.
to get back to what they think they deserve. And if they're comfortable in chaos, they'll make chaos. And so, it's healing those. So I look at it as like, look, it's like you get superpowers from your trauma, but you have these pockets of kryptonite where like you will just be like Superman, right? Where it's like you can do all the things and then you just hit an area of kryptonite, you just fall right over. And it's really destabilizing and frightening for
Mm.
them. But I do a lot of work with like helping them in their nervous system, helping them to understand their brain, and you'd mentioned EMDR and all the acronyms that go with that. Like that's a great
Yes.
way. It's an incredible technique to process trauma that's trapped in the body and then that's trapped in their amygdala, which, puts them in a fight or flight freeze state. And they're triggered into this other state. I say it's like, you have trauma if you feel like sometimes you lose your free will. You're walking along in the world, you see something, and then all of a sudden, you interact with somebody and then you feel like a child, right? As opposed to the powerful woman that you are. And so I'm like, that means that something got
Such
triggered.
a good, that's
Yeah.
a great explanation. That is super good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a way of like, because it's so, again, trauma is an injury, not an illness, very healable, and also makes you just feel crazy pants, because you're like, I can't, why am I responding this way? Why does this thing put me in bed for 2 days, but then I'm out here crushing it in other areas? So it's really tough. And again, because women tend to pathologize themselves, they tend to think they're the only ones. I mean, men do it too, but like women will say it's my fault, or what did I do wrong? And so it's like, no, 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 this is your brain's defenses using old defenses for an old situation, and it's trying to protect you, it's trying to help you. That worked for you at one point, but we have to help your brain evolve and grow and heal so that it can use defenses that work for your current life.
100%. That is so true. And you mentioned EMDR. So I want to tell everybody, can you explain to people what that is and how you use it?
Yeah, so it's been around, gosh, now probably 40 years. But for when it first came out, the inventor, who was a woman, she was thought of as quite of a quack about it, right? But then she was like, no, this is so powerful for processing trauma. So then she dove in and did an enormous amount of research to prove this is now what we call an evidence-based practice. So in any area of medicine and in psychology, we have things that are backed up by research, ones that are promising, but we don't have the research to prove them yet, and ones that are like, we got no research on this, so any gains are anecdotal. So this is a very strong evidence. They use it in the Veterans Administration, the VA, they use it in the Department of Defense. It's like a well-proven technique. So basically what it does, and I'll try to I have to explain a little bit what happens with trauma first. So
Yeah.
when our memory is split up in different ways. Our hippocampus would be like our file cabinet of memories, right? It's like our picture book, our yearbook, our thing of this happened when I was 6, then this when I was 7, then 8. And it's like the story we tell of our lives. It's in order. It's like nice files by year, by date, by circumstance. And then we have our amygdala. So our amygdala is an older part of our brain. It's the fight, flight, freeze area. It's the part that's very instinctual. It's the part where the trauma lives. So when something traumatic happens, our memory puts that memory in our amygdala and keeps it there and doesn't put it in our hippocampus. So that's where when we have a trigger for something traumatic, like so for example, and our brains are evolved. Think of it like a cave person, right? So we saw a bear one day, the bear chased us, right? And we escaped barely, but that lives in our amygdala. So that next time we see fur, that time of day, right, we're going to be hyper vigilant. Any
Yep.
smell, any person we were with when it happened, the whole goal of it keeping it in our amygdala is to make it reactive. And so that it happens, our reaction is faster than our cognitive thought can say, oh, look, a bear, right? So it keeps us alive, but it also keeps us hyper vigilant. So, and normally how that happens is in your sleep, when you dream, it'll process, your memories will go over into your hippocampus, but your brain's not going to release this trauma memory into your hippocampus and your filing cabinet until it knows you're safe. So what EMDR does is I use buzzers, but you can use eye movements, you can use auditory, but it basically uses bilateral movement between the areas of the brain. So it kind of moves the energy between the lobes of the brain the same way that like REM does, REM sleep, how your eyes go back and forth in REM.
Yeah.
So it'll use that in a safe setting to help you go into the memory when you're using the buzzers with someone who's safe, when your body and your nervous system are saying, I'm safe, I can let this go. And so we go through that memory in session and it moves over into the hippocampus. And you can see it in a brain scan. Like when someone gets triggered, like what part lights up versus afterwards, it's like, yeah, this thing happened.
Amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah, it's super powerful because we get stuck sometimes in talk therapy and we can't talk to our nervous system. So this really is one of the ways that you can bypass the bottleneck that is our talking and get to what's actually going on in our brain.
Well, and what's interesting, I don't want to generalize, but most people have some sort of trauma that is holding them back. So it's almost like every single one of us needs EMDR.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
especially attachment trauma, right? And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
so challenging because one of the weird things about biology that I would say I'm like, why are we designed this way? Like most of our attachment networks are developed before age 6, but we don't actually have conscious memories till after 3. It's called infantile amnesia. So whatever happens before 3, most people don't remember. So we develop most of our beliefs about who we are, our place in the world, our safety prior to us even having a memory of what happened.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So again, EMDR, you don't necessarily need the memory. You can just go into the feeling, and that's where attachment focused EMDR can go into, like, I feel unsafe, but I don't know why. And we can process that in your nervous system without even remembering, like, when I was 1, my parents forgot me in a store and now I have, abandonment issues. Like, you don't have to remember it. You can just process it by keeping your nervous system feeling safe.
Amazing. It's so I love talking about this stuff. This is such good stuff that you're doing. Well, and I know that so many women that I talk to are having trouble sleeping. I feel like when you talk to a woman, and I'm sorry, women, I'm not generalizing, but most women tell me that they're anxious or they're not sleeping.
Yes.
I feel like those are two huge issues. Can we help them? Can we give them some pointers for anxiety and insomnia?
Oh boy, yes. And that is like, understand, and you're right, though, you can generalize, that's a fair generalization. The research backs that up, that women do struggle with sleep a lot more than men. And there's
Yes.
there's a range of reasons for that. And so then there's a range of ways to approach it, because each woman needs to
Sure.
look at why. So what I usually do when someone comes to me with sleep, especially if it's like what you're saying, if there's anxiety with the sleep, I ask them like a series of questions and kind of explain to them why. I also love explaining to people, the plants, how they have their little care and feeding instructions. Like, I love, like, we don't have a care and feeding instruction on we're just given a human body to care for it
Yeah.
first, and then
Yeah.
you're trying to figure it out without like
Yep.
actually understanding how we even manage it. And somehow that's
Mhm.
okay, right? And then whatever we don't understand, we turn into shame. And that's why I love explaining that, because they'll be like, why can't I sleep? And I'm like, okay, well, let's figure out, there's a reason. And then if we know why. So I'll go over the usual suspects of why women struggle to sleep. Okay. So
Okay.
first of all, we're biologically designed not to sleep as deeply, because
Mm,
we, historically have had the role of the baby and the caregiving role.
yes.
So we're just kind of doomed to birth a bit with that.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then on top of that, when we have kids, it gets worse. So if you have a baby, then it's worse, and it continues to be worse for the rest of your life. One would hope that this was like a little biological gift that got removed at menopause, when they're like, okay, you're probably
Mm,
done. But no, because we still, again, usually care for babies in some capacity historically, right? Like, over the human history, we would be caring for our
yes.
babies or other people in the village or whatever. So we just keep that gift. And also, this is fun. Whenever you are pregnant, or even if you don't carry your baby, when you start caring for a baby, the part of your brain that sees risk grows by 12%. So that's what I call, like, I said, that's the reason for what we call like mommy snuff films, where it's like your child trips on the, on the playground, and you're like, oh my God, they're going to fall on a stick and roll down a hill. And then a beast is going to eat them. And like, you see 30 horrible outcomes in 20 seconds where you're like, like, that's
Yeah.
why, that's that part of your brain, and it never goes back to normal after you.
Oh, interesting. Where were you when I had babies to tell me this?
It's so tough. And again, it's like where women don't understand that they shame themselves, because a lot of new moms, they will see bad things happening to their baby in their mind. They'll be like, what if I kill my baby? What if I sit on my baby? What if I do all this? And they think, oh my God, I want to hurt my baby. But when they
Oh,
get, it's so sad. And they a lot of times don't share it, because they're going to take my baby. I'm a bad mom. I'm a bad person. But they did brain scans on women who were having those thoughts. And what they found was, it wasn't the part of the brain that plans action. It was the part that was doing risk analysis. So what it
mm.
means is their brain is saying, I have to protect my baby from everything, including me. So I'm
Oh,
going to run through every possible bad thing I could do to my baby so that I won't do it. And like, they don't know it, so they feel terrible.
makes so much sense. I remember walking down the stairs with my new babies and going so slow because I was so nervous.
Yeah. And I mean, historically speaking, anxious moms are more likely to keep their babies alive. And nature is more interested in us being alive than happy. We are not
Yeah.
designed to be happy. We are designed to stay alive, which is why we have to work
Wow.
so hard at peace and happiness. That we
Mm,
have to practice. So,
sense.
so back to the sleep. Like, again,
Yes.
you might in the middle of the night wake up running your risk analysis. That part of your brain, when you finally have silence, might do that. So that's also a part of it, and the anxiety that women tend to have. Also, and this is something they very rarely talk about, is that during perimenopause, which PS starts around 40, possibly earlier, your hormones are a mess. I would say post-menopause is actually smoother sailing. And
Okay.
perimenopause is the roller coaster, and that can start as early as your late 30s.
Mm.
It's really, really a crime that we, like, so few OBGYNs are trained in this. I was just reading like a study that said like 1 in 5 don't even hear about it in medical school. And those
Terrible.
that do hear about it only get like half of a lecture on it. Yet they are literally the people that we go to talk about
Right.
hormones. And they know nothing. And I've talked to OBGYNs that don't know anything. Psychologists don't know anything, which is why, like, for me, as part of my work, it's been my mission to like learn, but I had to step outside of psychology completely and deep dive
Mm.
on hormones, because I would see women come to me and they would be like, I'm not sleeping. I'm like having rage. I don't want to have sex, even though I love my partner. What the heck is going on? And I will say, like, I can help you with the, figuring out what's going on psychologically. You got to go to your doctor and get your hormones tested. And half of the time, if not more, they had imbalances. And that they, well, there's reasons why some women can't or don't want to do hormone replacement, but it is definitely highly preferable if you can, at least from a mental health perspective. I don't want to speak about something outside of my area, but from a mental health perspective, because women who don't have their hormones balanced, again, rage, fighting with their partner, mood swings, guilt, shame, and like, it's literally the middle of our lives. Women live much longer than men. We're having this go on right smack in the middle, where we've got, now a lot of people have babies, or they've got teenagers in the home even. They're right in the middle of their professional peak, right? When they're really should be crushing it and getting to levels of leadership. And yet they're having hot flashes in the boardroom,
Yeah.
having rage. And when I say rage, I don't just mean anger. I mean, like, if
Mm.
you've been through that, right? Like, it's a level of just like, I will kill you all, that like that women usually don't experience. And
Yeah.
so, but it causes sleep disturbances. And so low testosterone can cause middle of the night waking. Progesterone can impact it, and estrogen. So I would say if a woman is after 38, 39, especially if her mother had early menopause, because menopause typically happens. Now, menopause is a year without periods. That's what that word means. So typically 51, earlier for women who are not white. Like, it's earlier for Asian women, and it's earlier for Black women, it's earlier for Latino women. So
Oh, interesting.
yeah. And the problem is most women suffer through their 40s, causing chaos throughout their lives, or what's terrible, they'll put them on an SSRI, which hurts bone density. And they're not giving them the hormones that also protect their bone density. So then they can be set up for osteoporosis and
My goodness.
and limited mobility and health later. So again, it's really important that we understand. I always recommend get a full scan of your hormones. If you have been a decent sleeper and all of a sudden you're in your 40s and not sleeping, get your hormones checked. It is probably the thing that's causing it. So, those are the things. Then from like a sleep perspective, don't scroll in your bed. Like, that's blue light. And when it's so
Yes.
funny, we all know the thing, like, we all know not to scroll. We all know to have dark. We all know to have a cold room and then we don't do it. So, but I would say, like, don't scroll for an hour before bed. Don't scroll news or things that are going to get you triggered in your bed. Our bodies still think like cave people. If you're looking at a war while laying in your bed, part of your body is going to be like, my God, there's a war in my room. It's going to be stressed out because it doesn't understand that it's just in your phone. So yeah, so all of that, I don't know if that, but at least if you're listening,
Super helpful.
yeah, they can run down that checklist that I give to my clients when they come in and say, I'm not sleeping. I'm like, okay, when is it you're waking? What is it you're thinking? Have you had your hormones checked? And I just run through that checklist. And then then they'll know how to actually treat it appropriately. And because usually what they end up being given is sleep aids, but that has its own negative impact. So, you want to make sure
Yes.
you treat the root causes.
Well, and we have to check in with ourselves too, because my husband and I realized that we had to stop watching a certain show before bed.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Right?
Was it crime drama? Was it something that was getting you?
Oh my gosh, it's Yellow Jackets. I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix, but we love it, but we cannot watch it before bed. And
No.
then last night, you think reading is so good for you, but I don't think I can read my Kindle before bed. I think I have to have like a real book.
Yes. Yeah. All of that. Like, really.
Yes.
So, um, like this is like the best treatments and the things for insomnia. Always, always, always what we say, your bed is for nothing other than sleep, sex, cuddling. That's it.
Mm.
Even I would say reading, you'd be better to have a reading chair,
Oh,
because what can happen is you may have a cause of insomnia that then is resolved. So say it is hormone based, but if your brain starts to associate bed with not sleeping, you don't want that. Right.
that
So
is interesting.
yeah. So if you wake up, if someone has really bad insomnia, what we always recommend, like a part of the sleep hygiene and the treatment, is we say, like, if do not stay in bed awake more than 15 minutes. So if you wake up in the middle of the night, get up, go to your chair, read the most boring book in low lighting that you possibly can until you're
Yes.
sleepy, then go back to bed. If you're awake for more than 15 minutes, get up, go over, like, because unfortunately smartphones like really have increased sleep problems, and they decrease sex, the amount of sex people have, by a lot.
Oh, I
Because
believe it. It's like, I'm on my phone. Leave me
yeah,
alone.
yeah, you're both sitting next to each other, sending each other reels back and forth and not having sex.
I love it.
Yeah.
Not good. Not good.
No, we all do it, but it's like you have to put, now we know more. We didn't know, it made sense, but that we would just do this, and we didn't have any kind of precautions or things around it. Now we know the impact. We have the research, and we could say it's fine to scroll your phone. Don't do it in bed right before bed. So,
Right.
crime.
Yes.
But you're
Such
right.
good advice.
We love a good crime drama or an action flick. Don't do it before bed, because your brain
Oh,
is like, I gotta be geared up, especially if that thing is happening in your room.
yes. Do not. Do not. That is very good advice. Avoiding the high crime shows. So, I want to talk about ADHD because it looks very different in women, is what I'm learning.
Yes.
So, can you tell everyone the signs of it in a woman?
Yeah. So, oh my goodness. And that's again, this is like a specialty that I ended up getting into by just the fact of who I worked with. A lot of female
Yes.
founders also have ADHD. A lot of founders in general have ADHD. Like,
So cool.
yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah. And so the issue is, though, and what has been the problem in society is there's certain diagnoses that get put together with a gender. We
Mm.
have always classically, for example, thought of narcissism as a male thing. We always think of your classic blowhard, brag about himself, narcissist male.
Yes.
There's just as many narcissistic females, but they look different. So now there's awareness, thank God, and starting to be, especially narcissistic mothers. Oh my gosh, that is probably the worst thing that you can be born into if you're a woman. So, but ADHD in women was one of those, because with little girls, they're not hyper and moving around. And so they weren't getting diagnosed. They were just thought of as like messy, or not, not paying attention, or they tended to get pathologized, or not pathologized, but like judged as like if it was their personality. And so
Yeah.
they didn't get diagnosed, which they could have been if they were ever sent for testing, by the way. It's not that the testing is skewed, it's that the observation of the adults to send them for testing was wrong. And now, and
Yes.
people are like, why is there so much ADHD in women? It's like, it's always been there. It breaks my heart when I see adult women who aren't diagnosed, because they have all these shame messages. I'm lazy. I'm messy. I can't finish things. I'm scattered. Like, they have all this shame again, right? Women pathologizing themselves.
Yes.
Whatever is not understood, we turn into shame. So, it's really talking to them about, so the signs that you're asking are the signs for women. And are you mean like an adult or a child? So
I mean, let's talk about an adult because I think women do not know when they have it.
no, they don't. So I'll ask different things. Now, there's a few fun ones that I can give them. And these are just kind of like anecdotal ones. If they're an adult, I'm like, so did you do cocaine in college? How'd that go for you? Like, that's like such a funny one, but it's true, where they're like,
Oh
no, I
boy.
wrote, I wrote my term paper. They're like, everyone else is sweating and running around, and I was so productive. I'm like, yeah, because that's a stimulant. I'm like, how do you do with coffee? How do you, like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. That's a funny one that I'll ask people. I can't say that it's a research based, but I would say anecdotally, it's a stimulant. And the way that ADHD brain responds to a stimulant is different than the way that like a neurotypical brain responds. So that's something I will ask. I will say, how many projects do you have that you have started and not finished? And also, like, do you lose things? Like some of that, that one's a little bit less common in women. Oh, this is such a sad fact too. I just read a research study on this. So women with ADHD have a shorter lifespan than other women. I know it's not sad. Men with ADHD also have a shorter lifespan. But this is a very sad thing. If they're married to a non-ADHD partner, a male with ADHD will get his lifespan back. A woman won't. And that's in part, I think, because of the gender dynamics, right? Women, like a married man just lives longer, a married woman does not, right? And so it's because women are like, you got to go to the doctor. Part of our risk analysis, I also say it's not just because we're better people, it's because we're also better long-term investors. And this man is our investment, or this woman is our life partner. We don't want to take care of them sick when they're old. So we're like,
Right.
take vitamins, go to the doctor, right? So a woman who is with a non-ADHD partner, if he is having that classic male role of not taking care of those things for her, then I would be curious actually with the research on same-sex couples, because I suspect that like a lesbian partnership where one has ADHD, probably the one with ADHD probably lives longer, because again, that's
Mm-hmm.
what you might care
Yeah.
about. And I don't know how it is.
Yeah.
So anyways, it just, do you struggle to follow through? Do you feel like you start something and can't finish it? All of those like classic symptoms. Are you really sensitive to rejection? Are you really sensitive to criticism? Do you struggle like when you feel like, because that's something it's called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So that's a long word for basically saying people with ADHD tend to be more sensitive to criticism.
Oh, I
That's
didn't know that.
Yeah, it's not in the DSM, but it's just something which is our diagnostic manual, but it is something that has been noticed, in the research. So, you might be more sensitive to criticism. And so it's just looking at those things. Like, do you struggle with like keeping things clean? Do you describe yourself as someone who's like lazy? Do you scroll for way longer than other people or have a hard time, staying off of your phone? So a lot of these types of things. Also genetics, do you have a parent that you think maybe didn't, has the undiagnosed ADHD? So these are the things to look at in women that I will ask them. If I hear a lot of I'm lazy, I can't follow through, really high functioning, maybe in like their work where it's a stable environment and they have set expectations. But again, the ADHD brain, the non-ADHD brain is motivated by consequences. If I do this, I'll be rewarded. If I don't do this, I'll be punished. The ADHD brain is motivated by interest and urgency. And so if they're not interested and it's not immediately due, they're going to be hard pressed to get motivated to do the thing. Oh, another one I asked, are you the person who puts off something until the night before and then crushes it? And then you're like stressed and all that. So a lot of times they could do compensatory strategies is what we call it. Like they could do that when they're in college and just live without sleep. But by the time they get in their 40s, they're like, I can't do this. I'm tired. Like and so we work on strategies of how to work with their brain to be able to accomplish what they want.
So to the ADHD woman listening, what is your advice to her to start to head in a better direction with her ADHD?
I mean, I would definitely say if you suspect it but don't know, get evaluated by a good evaluator. You're probably going to need to go in someone's office and actually sit down and do the tests. There's a lot of not very effective evaluations out there, right? Where someone will just ask you questions, but anxiety can look like ADHD, PTSD can look like ADHD. You don't want to be misdiagnosed and then medicated if it's not the actual.
Yeah.
So get a really good evaluation, usually going in office, and so that and then once it's figuring out what you want to do with it. And so some women do want to do medication. There's better medications than there is in the past. Some women who were diagnosed when they were young, they're like, I don't want to do Ritalin. It was horrible. I don't want to do Adderall. It's very buzzy. There's a lot of new medications that aren't buzzy like that. Vyvanse is better. There's even non-stimulant medications. There's different treatments that are now coming out, like neurofeedback is something that's used. Again, it's still kind of research pending to see how effective it is for ADHD, but there's all these other treatments you can do. There's supplements, there's all kinds of stuff. So what I would say is get a good diagnosis, look at it from that part. What can I do either with supplements or medication? Get educated, get your partner on board, because there is an enormous amount of marital stress that happens when you have an undiagnosed ADHD. And a lot of it is just knowing. So if your partner knows then they can be a part of it. Because for them, they're probably just frustrated, right? They're like, how come sometimes she pays so much attention to me and other times she ignores me? How come she's so reactive, you know?
Yeah.
But usually the people who end up in a relationship with someone, I mean, an ADHD partner is incredible if you both know what's going on. They tend to be super loyal. When they are like, when they focus on their partner, like they are hardcore in for life. They adore their partners. They're very exciting and fun. Usually they're really up for new things. Like they are great. And they tend to attract partners who are a lot more like, you know, take it like step by step by step, because they're looking for the excitement and then they're looking for like, you know, stability, and the two get together
Yes.
and
Yes.
they make each other's lives better. So I would say you definitely want your partner to be educated for sure, so that they know, and then they can be like, oh, she's not just reactive, or she's not ignoring me, or, you know, you can work together to come up with strategies in your household. Also, by the way, having kids, oh my gosh, if you're going to enter something into your life that makes ADHD so much harder, children, it's like having
Yeah.
gremlins that run around your house and move your things, right? So it's like, if you've built all these strategies around like, okay, I don't lose my keys because they're always in my bowl, right? Until your toddler grabs it out, putting it up their nose and sticking it in their purse. Like, you know what I mean? A little tiny purse. Like, it's so maddening. A lot of my clients don't realize they have it until they have kids. And it's the breaking point of like, all the things I used to do don't work anymore, you know? And so, yeah, so it's also, you have to get really educated. I would say a lot of education, trial and error on what works. That's such tiny things you can do to make all the difference. Like if you're saying something to your partner with ADHD, like don't say it across the room while they're looking at something else. They're not going to hear you. And then you're going to get frustrated. Go over, touch their arm, make eye contact, and say this, right? Have a deadline for what the thing is if you need them to do something because of the urgency, you know, and you want them, like that's the way to do it. Or you can come with the funnest hacks for yourself. You can gamify stuff, you know, you could do all kinds of things where it's like, I have to do this, you know, before the timer goes off. You know what I mean? Like, and then that creates the urgency. I have to fold my laundry, but I'm going to do it in 10, you know, minutes instead of, and I'm going to beat my own thing. That's how
Love it.
you make it fun for your brain and you make it work.
I love that you're figuring everybody out. I love listening to this. It's like somebody had said to me once that I'm like a private investigator. It was some school situation. And I was like, no, this is like therapy. I feel like we're like investigators.
Yes, therapists are the most. I used to read mystery novels, but then I would try to figure out the author's tells to figure out who did it. So if I read the same person more than once, because how different is that from therapy? You listen to somebody
Yes.
talking and you learn how they tell their own story.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
A
so
100%. Yes. Yes. Well, and I know that our time is running out. And I also know that you work with very successful people. So I want to ask you before I let you go. So to the women who want to be at their peak performance every day, tell us what advice you have for them, because I know this is your specialty.
this is the thing that I tell them, because a lot of women, and this is where the society is not necessarily built for women, they'll say, if they come to somebody and they're like, this is really hard, I'm really tired. Usually the advice they get is, well, why are you doing that? You don't need to be CEO. You could just take a break. And then they're like, wait, no, but I want to. I just want
Yes.
to know how to do it. So I say, look, you're a race car. You are a race car. You enjoy, and then same, right? For again, the ADHD brain, you want excitement, novelty. Same for the person who is like high functioning. They're a race car. And what do we know about race cars? They have to have a pit crew. They got to have their bolts tightened, their tires pumped. They have to have really, really dialed in self-care. They usually need a team that's like working on, you know, like a psychologist who knows how to work with them, who's not going to, again, tell them just to quit their job because it's hard, you know, but to understand they want to do hard. Just because it's hard doesn't mean you should stop. You know, you just need help to do it. So, you know, I think a lot of women are taught, like, if it's hard, you shouldn't do that. Like, what? Like, that's never been really an option for us anyway, as women. Like, life is going to be hard. We just need skills on how to do it so we don't, you know, die early and get sick, which is what tends to happen to us. So, I say you're a race car, and the answer isn't going to be tootling down the back lane, but you have to know that you can't have these loose bolts on your car rattling, because that's going to cause a crash. And so get early about listening to what your nervous system needs. Who's your support team? What are these unprocessed traumas? Like you said, like we're all walking around with these unprocessed traumas. Let's process those, so those aren't having you moments where you lose your free will and don't feel like in a room. And then let's look at that way. Let's go through your whole systems. Let's do a systems check and come up with a plan for you. So for a woman who wants to be high functioning, first of all, realize your whole life is integrated, right? Your home life, your personal life, your work life, it's all integrated, and you have to treat you like a whole person and see what it is that there are these things that need to be tightened, that need to be healed, that need to be worked on, so that you can continue to have the excitement and the joy and like the meaning of doing this racetrack, but without your wheels falling off and you crashing into the stands, and a lot of times for women, what that looks like is they get ill. They get very, very ill in their late 40s. And women are very high functioning until their bodies say to them, you have got to stop, because our brains can lie to us, but our bodies are always honest. And we are a lot of times as women taught to ignore what our body tells us. So I try to get people before that, right? Then you can, and you can even heal it to the point where their bodies will heal themselves. But if we get it if it's too broken down and too damaged, like, in older age, it's a lot harder. So the earlier you start to work on these things, the better. So,
the way that you care for your people just oozes out of you. And they're so lucky to have you. I can't even tell you how much I love what you're doing. And I feel really honored that I got to talk to you today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I love. Like I said, like podcasts are where a lot of my clients get information. It's where women get the information they need. So I love it.
Good to know. Well, I'm glad I'm doing it then, because I'm enjoying it, and I get to talk to fabulous people like you. So I know our time is up, and I could talk to you all day. I've loved talking to you, and I just want to thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is so fun.
This is Rebecca Green, and I want to remind everyone to spend every day laughing, learning, and loving. Thank you for tuning in to the Whiny Palooza podcast. If you like what you heard, please be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. While you are there, leave a review. I love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
This show has been produced by Market Domination, LLC. To discover how you can have your own show completely done for you and turn it into a real published book and become the authority in your marketplace, go to www.marketdominationllc.com/podcast offer.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com.